This episode features a discussion about intimate partner violence. The content may be triggering, and resources are listed in the show notes. Listener discretion is advised.
I'm Kortney Wilson, and this is the Shit Stick of Life podcast. My guest today is an author, educator, public speaker, and podcaster, and most importantly, a fearless advocate raising awareness about intimate partner violence. Her late daughter, Sarah Boulay, disappeared in 2023 at 36 years young. Every mother's nightmare. Less than 2 weeks later, she would learn that her daughter's estranged husband had taken her life. Fartumo Kusow, thank you so much for being here. I'm honored to speak with you today.
Thank you, Kortney, for having me.
First of all, I want to say that I learned a lot in the last few days about your story, but I would like for you to take us back a little bit and tell us a little bit about yourself, where you came from, how you ended up in Canada, and a little bit about your family.
I was born in Somalia, East Africa, and that's where I lived for the first 22 years of my life. And we had to flee the violence that erupted in my country. And I arrived in Canada in February of 1991 with 2 children and the one on the way, with literally the clothes on my back. I didn't speak English, even though I had an education because of the war. So it was starting all over again.
So at that time, you had 2 children. Name your 3 children for me.
At the time, I had Zahra, who was 6 years old. And then I have my son, Abdi, who was 5 at the time. And then I have a 33-year-old now that teaches for Toronto board that was on the way. I was 8 months pregnant when I came.
And did you come over with your husband?
I came with my husband then, and then I had 2 more children here. The one I came pregnant with and 2 more. Just like the war fractured the country that we came from, the relationship was fractured along with it. So it was a challenging situation.
So your marriage did not survive?
No, I became a single mother of 5 children between the age of 12. My daughter was 12, Zahra, and my youngest was week before she turned 2 in 1999, just tender age of 31 years old in a new country.
And you are incredibly educated. I mean, are you a professor in Windsor right now?
I am a high school English teacher.
High school English teacher. Oh, yeah, you're a brave woman. That sounds like my worst nightmare after raising teenagers.
Yes.
Your daughter, Sarah, and I'm pronouncing her name correctly?
Yes.
Sarah, was married or in a relationship quite young. Around 18 years old.
Yes.
And was she your first child to enter into a relationship?
She is my eldest, and she's my first child to enter a relationship. And this was a child who had 2 things. Number one, like a lot of other women, she was a fixer, even at 12 years old. If she had a crush or 10 boys in the class that she could have a crush on at 12, she'll have the crush with the broken winged one. So that's who she was. And but this was a child that didn't have anything, not even a parking violation ticket. And at the age of 18, she graduated and she was admitted to Wayne State University in Detroit.
A bit of a goody two-shoes. I fell into that category when I was that age as well. Was she independent? And she had her own voice?
She had her own voice. She was very independent and she was very, very articulate. But she was also socially conscious that things that didn't work, she always felt like you shouldn't take more than you need. Like she couldn't understand why somebody would have 4 cars or have like 10-bedroom house and things like that.
I know that I was raised unconsciously, I believe, that, marriage is everything. When you get married, it's for better or worse and you stay together. Was she raised that way? Were you raised that way? And, having also been through a divorce, dealing with my personal guilt, did you experience that? And do you feel she did?
My mother is 90 years old now, and I have a podcast show dedicated to her called My Mother, the Person and the Patient. And unfortunately, she lives with late-stage Alzheimer's now. But
I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, thank you. My mother was divorced twice, and my father was the third marriage. So my mother raised my sister and I as a firm believer that if it's not working, you get out.
Was there physical abuse in your first relationship, if you don't mind me asking?
Not the physical abuse, but major thing I felt was feeling abandoned. When we came to this new country and I was trying to do my best to hold it together, especially he was a few years older than I was. So I understood all that because I was only 22 when we came. And punished, almost I felt I was wearing the face of what happened in the country. Like I was responsible because he had a great job, established career, and all of it. He worked in Middle East. But Middle East doesn't allow you to immigrate, doesn't even give your wife a visa. So we had no other
Wow.
option when the war started, because he worked in Saudi Arabia for a long time, well before I met him. But they would only give me a 3-month visa to visit him in any given time. And that required for me to be from a stable country. So once there was a war and there was no embassy, I couldn't be with him. The children could not be with him. I couldn't even go to the maternity hospital and deliver the children. Every time I had to go back home.
So Sarah and your other children had an example in you of a very independent woman, and their grandmother. So
Yes.
you know, this is why when we talk about intimate partner violence, it can happen to anyone. So I want you to take me back. So Sarah meets a gentleman in her late teen years. Did you like him?
So what happened was she went to Wayne State, and because she was commuting to school there in Detroit, I don't live far from Detroit, that she would start school in September, last week of August, beginning of September, and she met him October, just asking him where the closest mosque was so she could pray Friday. And that's how she met him. But I didn't like him because not particularly not like him, but she was only 18, he was 26. I thought that was a huge age gap.
You know, it's funny because when I read this, I actually was going to ask you, and please forgive, my ignorance here. I was going to ask you if it was a prearranged marriage because
No.
it was so young.
Yeah.
So it was not.
It was not. And he already had a child who was 6 or 7 at the time.
Oh.
And when she introduced the idea, I just said, no, I don't agree with this. I know you're 18, you'll do whatever you feel like. But in my opinion, he's too old and he already has a ready-made relationship. You are too young to take that responsibility.
But I have now 2 kids, one 18 and 20, in that age gap, and you can't really tell them what to do.
No, you can't.
You have to let them make their mistakes. That relationship lasted how long? Until she died, or did they break up before that?
The last time when she died, that was the 11th time of her attempt to leave.
Oh,
Because
my
he lived
goodness.
in Michigan. And it was, and the violence against her started 6 weeks into it. She came home with the first injury that November on Thanksgiving when she went to a party with his family for Thanksgiving barbecue, of all things.
Did she make an excuse for him when that happened, or did she recognize right away this is wrong?
No, she made excuses. So she met him 2005 October. They didn't get married until March of 2008. But the violence was going on all along. And she would call me and I would go and I would pick her up and then she would be home and then he would send all these gaslighting manipulation messages like he has a chessboard without a queen. He might as well kill himself if she doesn't come back to him. She's his life. Just say the word and I will turn myself to the police.
So the master manipulator.
Sending flowers, and then she
Yeah.
would go back and he's better. But I knew that this had nowhere to go but bad.
He was the master manipulator, and she was a puppet at that point.
Yeah.
So at what point did she lean into you more, where she wasn't making excuses, or did that ever happen?
So 2006 was the first time she'd called me, and she was actually hiding in a dryer drum, inside the dryer.
Oh my goodness.
And that's
yes.
when she'd called me and she said, oh, I'm hiding in the dryer drum. Can you come and get me? So I went and I picked her up. it was always when she was really, really, really enraged and the pain was still there, she would talk about it and she would say, this is what he did, this is what he said. And almost always it was jealousy, almost always. He could fly off the handle if somebody was following her and she held the door for the person following her. If that was a
That
male,
was enough to
set him
push him
off.
off, set him off.
And he'll say, okay, 6 months ago you were here in this street, what were you doing there? So
was she working through this time, and did they have children together?
they didn't have children together.
Okay.
She worked on and off, but she could never keep a job down with two reasons. Number one, she's either has a black eye or something, or he forbids her from leaving. For the longest time, she lived in America with him, but he would never file a legal document for her. So she had to commute back to Canada to work and go back there. She never had American legal document until 2016, finally, American immigration said, you have to go back home.
You can't do this anymore.
You can't do this anymore. This guy's not filing anything, go home. And then she came home, 2016, and I said, great.
And you probably thought at that point, this is our chance to get her away from him.
This girl was so bright, had 90s through high school in her first year, but as soon as she met him, her life was just a nightmare. So she could not, the degree she started 2014, 2004, she just finished before she died. And it was like this roller coaster that she could not get up.
Take me back to May of 2023. And I also want to say that when I heard your story, it reads to me like something that has happened over 10 years. And when I saw the date of her death, it was 2023, and I was doing the math and I was thinking, you have to still be grieving. So take me back to that month or that day. What was happening? Did you speak to her?
So we thought she finally left. Her brother was getting married in Toronto, July of 2022. And he didn't want to come to the wedding, even though they were both invited. Before, she would miss all kind of family event, but this time she decided, I'm not going to miss my brother's wedding. So he beat her up, but she decided to take the train, and then she came home without him. She came to the hotel without him, and we picked her up, and she was rooming with my sister, and when she took off her dress to get into her pajamas, her entire body was blue and black. And she couldn't breathe, she couldn't life. So we had to get a brace for her to tie her chest because her ribs were fractured. So we said, you're not going back. Otherwise, we're not going to talk to you anymore. She said she's not going to go back. But then she went back to school. She got a job. Everything was working out. From July of 2022 until January of 2023, we changed the phone and registered under my name. We changed the email. She got a new job.
And she was living with you?
She was living with me in the basement. I said, you can stay here as long as you need. No rent is asked. No food is asked. Get your life together. Get moving.
Did she file for divorce at that time?
No, she didn't file for divorce yet because she didn't want to upset him more. She just wanted the dust to settle. And she said, I don't even want to date anybody else. I just want to be left alone.
Yes. Okay.
So by January, February, she started seeing him for coffee dates. For he would convince her to come see her for coffee or for
that
dinner.
must have broke your heart.
Yeah, and each time she went, she came back with an injury. Black eye, bruised wrist, bruised toes. Her back hurt because he pushed her off the stairs. But this time she was talking about it. She was going to therapy. She was seeing psychiatrists because she couldn't sleep at night.
But she was also in some ways addicted to him because she kept going back. It is a form of addiction.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So then on April of 2023, 22nd, at the end of the exam, she said, we've decided to take a week together and talk about things, and it doesn't work out. And I said, listen, it's not going to be any better than the last time you saw him. Don't do that. Okay, I won't do. But then I came back from work one day and she was gone. And she wouldn't take my calls. But then May 5th, she came back with a black eye, like this whole face. And I said, listen, we are going to go to the police right now and report this person because I'm not doing this anymore. This is just destroying me, not only you.
Did she agree to do that?
She agreed to do that. And I said, okay, are you hungry? Because she looked so exhausted and defeated. So I said, I'm going to make you some eggs. And then I came back. She had called him and he'd sent her an Uber. And as she's walking out of the drive, I said, where are you going? And she said, I don't want to go to the police. I'm going. And I said, please don't go, because I'm afraid next time I'm going to collect you in a body bag.
Oh my God.
And then she was gone, and she was gone for the weekend. I'm calling.
And did you believe that with every ounce of your body? You believed he was capable of killing her?
Yeah, if she didn't go, because I could see the violence before. It was like a couple of times a year. And it was like 4 times a year. And it was now like 5 times a year. And it was like, now it was every time she was in his presence, there was a violence every single time. It was only escalating, and the injuries were getting worse. And her tolerance was getting weaker. So then she called me on May the 8th, and she said, you know what? It was Monday. So she said, I left, and I'm going to get myself into the battered women's shelter, because he knows where we live. If I finalize this, I don't know what he's capable of doing.
So he must have actually threatened her and said he would kill her for her to actually go to that place.
Yeah. And then as she was talking to me, she said, oh, this is your birthday. Maybe I should go tomorrow. I said, honey, go. This is the best birthday present ever. So she was in the shelter for 3 weeks. And Friday night, 6:12, she called me. She was so excited. And she said, hey, I'm just thinking to put as much distance between him and I. So I think I'm going to look for work and go to Toronto. So I said, listen, if you're going to Toronto, you don't have to wait until you look for work. Your sister will be there. She has a place. She'll put you up until you get on your own 2 feet. I'll talk to your sister.
Was that because you didn't want her to be alone?
And I thought maybe he wouldn't travel 4 hours and she'll have some distance. Yeah. And as soon as she said, I'm going to get out, I just want her to say, okay, tomorrow, catch the train, get out.
Yeah.
And she said, okay, can we have dinner Monday and talk about it? And I said, okay, I'll pick you up. That Monday never came.
Was that the last time you spoke to her?
That Monday never came. And the tragedy of it all, she would have taken a bullet for him.
She would have.
That's the tragedy of it all.
And you would have taken a bullet for her?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just...
So you don't hear from her the next day. I'm assuming at this point you're speaking every day.
And we're speaking every day, but then I text her. So what happens is so that was Friday. Saturday, 3:00 in the morning, I woke up like somebody dropped me in ice water. I was so cold. It's May. The air conditioner is on. The house is a good temperature. And I wake up and I'm so cold. And then I get up. And I had to go downstairs and throw a blanket in the dryer to warm it up and cover myself. And the first thing I did is I opened her phone and I checked her location, and it's been disabled. And then I checked her find my phone, and I can't.
Now, has she done that before to protect him?
No. She wouldn't take my calls, but I can always see where she is, yeah. And then the phone had like 4 times that a call leaves her phone to the same number.
You could tell who she was calling because you were paying for her phone bill?
Because the phone was registered under me to protect her privacy.
Yes, of course. I have that with my kids. She had called out to whom?
For a number that's new in her communication log.
Okay.
A call went out 4 times from 2:30 in the morning until 3:30 in the morning. And those were 4 calls that went to that. So the first 3 were not picked up. You could tell it was like a minute. Mm-hmm. And then the 4th one was picked up and it lasted 6 minutes.
Who did you learn that she called?
I don't know, but the police know. And I think that's what triggered this violence against her. And I think it's some kind of jealousy.
So he was following this along.
Yeah. And I think he's the one who made those calls. I don't think she made those calls.
Okay, so now we flash forward. How long do you look for her? I read that you were putting up posters you were a desperate mother looking for her daughter. Did you go to the police?
So the shelter actually called the police when she was no-show, because the rule with the shelter was that if you are unaccounted for within 24 hours and you're trying to get out of a violent relationship, they file a missing person with the police. So the police, since the shelter filed it Monday, the police acted on it right away. So I went to her workplace and Monday, and they said she didn't show up for work and she didn't call in sick. But There was no airtime usage. There was no data usage on her phone after Saturday morning, for 3 o'clock Saturday morning. So I know, even if she doesn't want to talk to me, she would be on that phone.
Did you instinctively know as a mother that she was gone?
I knew Saturday morning she was gone. And to this day, every time I think about it, I don't cry. I get this cold feeling.
What do you think that is? Do you think that's instincts, energy, her?
I think it's motherly instinct, and I think it's her connection because I'm a firm believer that when you give a birth to a child, that child has been physically attached to you for 9 months. And the sign of where they were attached to you is always there on them.
Yeah.
And I think it's like, especially for a daughter, that daughter was actually in her grandmother's womb.
Yes.
Right? Because girls born with the eggs that they were going to have children. So
That's right.
her grandmother or great grandmother had those eggs that led to my mother, that led to me, that led to her.
Yeah. But you know what? My daughter, I have 2 biological children, and my daughter's actually adopted. She was adopted at birth. And a couple of hours after she was born, I had her skin to skin, and I actually breastfed her. Even without her having been in my body, I have instincts about her and for her that I can't explain because we don't have a biological connection. But anyway, so you had these motherly instincts. You knew right away. You went to the shelter, went to the police. At what point did they contact you and tell you what happened?
So the police, dealing with the police is kind of like a tricky situation, I came to find out. The first time I met with the police, sat with them, was Tuesday.
Okay.
So the Tuesday they interviewed me, I gave them access to her phone contact, the person she was in contact with. I gave this person who killed my daughter's name, his first name, his last name, where he lives, his address.
Did you say, I know that he killed her?
Yeah. I said, I know he killed her, but I pray he didn't. Because can you imagine the betrayal of it all?
You're kind of, isn't this crazy? But you're hoping at this point that he's taken everything away from her to teach her a lesson. That is a terrible thing to think about, but that is your best case scenario.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the police will ask you questions that will lead me. So they did the first interview. They asked me questions, the history, the relationship, his address, his workplace, his parents' address, everything I can think of. And then they would call me and they would say something like, what shoes was she wearing? And I remember that day when she was talking to me, she actually dropped her phone. And she was on a FaceTime. So I could see her, and I told them shoes, and I told her what shoes she was wearing when I spoke to her Friday night, but I don't know if she went to the shelter, got changed. I don't know what happened. And then a day later, they asked me, they say, what was the color of her phone case?
Oh my goodness. So at this point, do you know that they have recovered her?
I don't, but I know, but I'm asking them, are you looking for a dead person or a live person? We can't tell you that. But I don't want to know at the same time.
Yeah, because there's still a chance.
There's still a chance. And another challenge is because traditionally there is processes to doing the final rites for the body. And she was a registered organ donor. So she made me promise, but she couldn't donate any organs of what had happened to her body after the fact.
How did he kill her, if you don't mind me asking?
They won't say.
So do you have closure in this?
No.
Why won't they say? Why are you not?
Because they say they're going to trial and they need to protect the evidence.
So they have not gone to trial yet?
No.
Okay.
No.
So he was arrested.
So he crossed to the States on the Monday 29th. So I believe she died early Saturday morning. So she went missing that Friday night when I spoke to her 6:12. I was the last person to speak to her. So he crossed back to the States on May 29th, which was the Monday. And he crossed back into the country June the 5th, following Monday. And that's when they arrested him.
And that's when they told you?
Yeah, they told me they arrested him like 5:30 or 6, and they came home and they told me 10 o'clock at night. They said, she's gone, and we arrested him for that. And then they found her body on the following day.
In that moment, what did you feel?
I just felt that coldness. My sister had to go to the dryer and cover me with heavy blankets. Everybody in the house was crying except me.
So you were in shock.
Yeah, I think I'm still in shock.
It is every mother, every parent, but every mother's worst nightmare to have to bury a child.
Yeah.
So at what point did you start grieving?
I'm not sure I started yet, to be honest with you, because I think I am asking myself, when is my grief coming? Because I am struggling to see her beyond that last time I saw her. I can't, my brain is not letting me go beyond that. I can't dream about her or nothing like that. I go visit her gravesite, and every time I'm thinking, there's something wrong with this picture. It should be the other way around.
So from an outsider looking in and hearing your story, it feels like what you did is you threw yourself in to something that would take up your time so that you could help others, but it also hasn't left you much for yourself to grieve.
No.
Is that true or no?
Yeah, I'm not sure if that will help, but I don't think I have any pieces. Every morning when I wake up to this day, she's almost gone 2 years now. Every time I wake up in the morning, it's a fresh onset. Because when I sleep, it doesn't look like it happened. And every morning when I wake up, I'm just thinking, this really happened.
Have you been seeking therapy?
Yeah, I'm in therapy, and I'm praying a lot, and I'm talking a lot. And I don't know, because traditionally we wash and clean the body, and when person passes away, and that's part of the process of letting
And you
go.
didn't get to do that.
I didn't get to do that because people at the mosque said, you don't want to see her like this. Some days I regret not insisting on seeing, and some days I'm okay with not seeing.
Because you feel like you didn't get the closure you needed. And then also you don't want to have the horror or the image of that.
There is so much denied to us and continues to be denied.
So what is the force behind getting up every morning and doing the good work that you're doing for intimate partner violence, which I have actually never heard that term before you. I've always thought of it as domestic violence. So what is that thing that keeps you going every single day?
I'm not sure. Part of me feels I don't have an option. A choice have been taken away from me to be quiet and go on with my own day. So that's one thing. Another thing is I felt for the longest time, for 18 years, I have been silenced. Partly, I wanted to protect her privacy. Some of the things that I experienced with her, I haven't even told her siblings. Some of the things that she went through, only myself and her know. Any violence you can think, physically, financially, emotionally. So that's one thing. Another thing, so we were silent. So every time she came home with an injury, we went to a psychiatrist. So I would say to the psychiatrist, when you finish interviewing her, let me add to things that she's not telling, because she's so traumatized that she can't remember some of the things. And they said, no, you can't add anything you tell us cannot be added to the file.
So do you think that is the right way to go? As from people listening right now, and there may be other women. I mean, your daughter was 36 years, I say young. She was very young. And there may be somebody listening right now experiencing something like that, making excuses, reliving the conversations that they're having with their friends, family, who are hearing very similar things that you said to your daughter. Do you have regrets?
Yes.
You do have regrets.
I have regrets in the sense that I realized that the silence is not protection. It is a permission for the perpetrator to continue. Whether that silence comes from the government, from the frontline healthcare workers, the police, the courts, the families, the victims, whoever it comes from, silence that we see, we are protecting somebody's privacy. We're protecting their rights to this, their rights to that. I think silence is actually permission for the perpetrator.
So what would you like to see change?
I would like to have the government, first of all, to acknowledge this is a pervasive issue. pervasive issue that's both predictable and preventable. I could have told you months and months before my daughter was killed, unless she got herself as far away from him as possible, this was the final end. I could see that train, and that train will reel off the track any minute now.
You know, it's so interesting because we have certain things in place to protect children, right? So we can call, and anybody anonymously can call and say, I fear for somebody that they're in a difficult situation, that they're being abused. And DCS or whatever child protective services are in your area would go to that home. We don't really have that for adults.
We don't. For example, I'm a high school teacher, so I'm a mandated reporter. If I know a child under 16 is living in a house, but the mom is being abused by a partner, boyfriend, husband, whoever it is, I am mandated to report. But if those children were over 16 and I knew this mother was being, I'm not allowed to report. So I think like UK has this system where woman only tells her story once, and that story is shared systemic way. And doctors, frontline workers, and the police are mandated to report a woman they see being in a violent situation. But, you know, when it comes to the government, when you institute something like that, then you have to put money behind it.
Right. But for somebody like your daughter who can't advocate for herself, the government essentially says, well, I mean, it's up to them if they don't advocate for themselves.
I want to see that change, and I want to tell people there is no hero coming, because I waited for that hero for a long time, not the one with the cape flying in any way. But we are our own heroes, and we need to do the work that needs to be done. And when the government goes in election, they knock on your door looking for your vote, make sure women's bodies, because it happens to other people, it mainly happens to women, are valued. Clearly, this tells me that in 2024, for us to be fighting with the government and saying, oh, just declare it epidemic, is us feeling that we work for them, but it's the other way around. And we need to make sure that women's safety is important.
A few years ago, and you've actually prompted me to maybe do this again on my personal page, but a few years ago, somebody posted something on social media and said, please share this. And essentially it was a way to say, if you are in a domestic abuse situation, I am a safe place. So please reach out to me and I will help get you help. Something as simple like that for you listeners out there is a way to reach people you may not know you need to reach. So when you say intimate partner violence, is that different than domestic violence?
It's yes and no. Domestic violence is just people that are, maybe it's a bit limiting, I think. It's people that are, mainly when we say domestic violence, we're talking about two people that are married, two people that are together. But intimate partner violence allows us to include people that are not fitting the traditional understanding of what we consider to be a partner, including those people, and including in dating relationships where girls go to college for the first time or high school. But I think a term that, in my opinion, that encompasses is gender-based violence, where it's the person's gender, whether that could even include a parent that's abusing a daughter versus a son. So anybody that's being targeted based on their gender can be under that system.
What would you say to others in this situation on behalf of your daughter, Sarah? What do you think she would want to say to people if she were here today?
To listen to other people with no judgment. And don't tell people to get out, because it's not that easy. But to make sure that you are listening to them with no judgment and realizing that it has no creed, it has no religion, it has no race, it has no economic standing. It can happen to anybody, and everybody is susceptible. Realizing that it's not something that happens to those people. It's something that happens to women that's not educated, women that doesn't have a support system, women that's poor. It can happen to anybody. Anybody can be impacted. And offering people, I don't know what to say, but I'm glad you told me. Or if there is any way I could help, please let me know.
Is it ever worth saying, if I just told you that this happened to me, what would your advice be to me?
Yes, showing the person, because my daughter would notice that in anybody and say, why are you here?
She would never say, stay. She would always say, go get help. You're worth more.
Exactly.
Yes. Well, you have done amazing things. It sounds like you still have a long way to go on your grief process, and grief can rear its dirty little head for years to come. I'm going to be following your journey very closely, especially since I have not mentioned this yet, but you live in Windsor, and I was born in Windsor.
Oh, yay.
Yeah, so
I lived in Windsor since I moved to Windsor in 1994. I came to Canada 91, lived in Toronto for 3 years, but couldn't manage the size of the city.
Yeah. Well, you wrote your first novel in English. So everybody, out there talking about, pushing through something. Fartumo moved here, didn't know a lick of English, put herself through school, raised 5 children, is advocating, but she also wrote her first novel in English, Tale of a Boone's Wife, published in 2017. What's next for you? Because I know you're working on another project.
I have a novel called Winter of My Spring, and coming out March 31st of 2026.
And what is that about?
And it's set in Somalia, and it's a story of 3 13-year-old girls. I don't know if you hear, but there was this 2014, there was this Bring Our Girls Back, when radicals kidnapped schoolgirls in a boarding school in Nigeria, and disappeared with them. It's like 200 girls, and there's like over almost 100 that have never been found. There were radicals who had their militia army, so they're using the girls to keep the boys in line. So they bring these girls, married to them to control everybody. So that was a hashtag, Bring Our Girls Back. I always know when we hear stories of women, we tend to hear it from other people. So kidnappers, people who did this, advocates. But I wanted to create a story where if that's what happened to girls, and those girls are telling us their story, so this is 13-year-olds that are telling us they were kidnapped, their experience there, and what happened. And it's called The Winter of My Spring. So as you're 13, you're just springing to life. If that has been taken off, like that spring is cut off by a winter, which is all the terrible they face. And then I have another one called Irrational Numbers, about the 17-year-old boy set in Toronto, that's going to come out in 2027.
Is that a true story?
No, all those are fiction.
All fiction.
Yeah.
So that's what's next for you. Is there anything else you would like to share about what you've learned along the way to other mothers or parents who are grieving the loss of their children?
One thing I want to share is that, and my new season of Break the Silence, Build the Future focuses on grieving process. At least I'm leaning on my process, because so if you're grieving, I want you to know that no one grief is like another.
Yeah, that's for sure.
So the griefs are different as the people who grieve it, and as different as that is, and as different our loss is. Give yourself grace. I had to learn myself, because I thought, why am I not crying? Why am I not falling apart? Because that's the social image of a mother that lost her child. Every time I saw a mother losing her child, I would think, how is she getting out of bed? How is she putting one foot in front of the other? But here I am going to work and doing all these charity work. And I looked around and I thought, maybe other people think I didn't love my daughter as much as I should have, or I don't feel the pain as much as I did. So I had to work through myself with my therapy and with my prayer group to kind of accept there is no healing from grief. You have to learn to carry it with you. So in my opinion, grief is a reflection of love, right?
Oh,
so your
that's good.
grief is just as deep as to how much you loved.
You don't heal from grief. You just learn to carry it with you.
There is nothing that could be done to take me back to May 25th when my daughter and I both woke up, we were fine, and we went to work. I'm a different person. For example, I used to do storytelling before this happened to my daughter. So every time I go to a storytelling workshop, I'll say, my name is Fartumo Kusow. I'm an educator, storyteller, podcaster. So that's how I would present. But now, anytime I present, I would say, my name is Fartumo Kusow. My daughter went missing May 26th. So my entire identity, the way I see myself shifted, and that's not going to change. So, and it's very important for us to realize that don't listen to people that tell you you're going to heal from it. And I know, and I talk about in this show, in this season, that I lost my father in 93. The best man any daughter could have. He died in Toronto, and I didn't grieve for him because my marriage was falling apart, and I needed to keep it together. And my marriage failed, and I didn't grieve for the failed marriage
because you were keeping everything together. You were in fight or flight.
And I thought, if I started crying, I would never stop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I cry to reset my nervous system, so I cry a lot, but that's how I deal it. Somebody else, might drink a lot of coffee or a Diet Coke, or somebody else might write a gazillion books like you've written to help yourself. I am in awe of you. I just want to tell you, I am so grateful that you wanted to do this podcast. I'm going to be praying for you, and
thank you so much.
Your journey, because I know it's a lot. You have a long way to go to learn how to carry your grief. And it sounds like your daughter, Zahra, was an absolutely beautiful human being.
She was a beautiful girl.
And that will be part of your legacy and hers. But I just thank you so much.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Find out more about the incredible and inspiring Fartumo Kusow, her book, her podcast, the upcoming International Women's Day event, and more in the show notes for today's episode. Follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and I'll keep reminding you. If you know someone with a remarkable story to share, please leave us a message or a voice note at shitstickoflife.com or DM us on Instagram. Thank you so much for listening.